I love coming to libraries. I love going to bookshops. In fact, I'll start off. Let's get straight away. This is not the final version of a poem. I couldn't find the statement. This is a poem that I wrote about libraries a few months ago. The library, where people are quite free and they can safely be surrounded by all possibility and the friendliness of curiosity. Where refugees can shoot the breeze and under threes learn ABCs and OAPs avoid the freeze. You see, here you'll find the keys to unlock the knowledge of Ramesses and cottage cheese and Cherokees and Croesuses and Hercules, Pleiades, Isosceles and vertices, and now, in parentheses, please do avoid late fees. Can I find out how many of you are members of Hitchin Library? This is great. How many of you have got books out at the moment? Right, so any of you who haven't got books out, take some books out tonight, because the more people who use the library, the more money they get, the more books there are. So it is a really great, and I do, I'll quickly tell that story. The story, in fact, no, I won't. What I'll do is, my next book, by the way, is predominantly about ADHD. This is, I'm going to do a little poem that leads into that actually. I, as a kid, I was very bookish, and like a lot of people, and we were saying before, a lot of librarians, a lot of people who work in bookshops, a lot of us weren't necessarily what would then be called kind of the alpha kid. And sometimes we didn't fit in. And very often a library, it's one of the things that I love about libraries, is when you come into the library, it is a place where people really do feel it's a safe space. It's a nice space. It's a warm space. Do you normally have a jigsaw out as well? It's a thing that I love. I was in Shoreham by Sea, and there was a jigsaw, and people come in and maybe they just do 3 little bits of the sky or whatever, but even that is part of the communion of what a library is. One of my favourite things was Doctor Who, and in fact I've just done a documentary for Series 7, I've got 2, which I love doing at the National Space Centre. And also the other thing that I loved was horror movies. Even though I'd never seen any horror movies, but at the age of 8, I went to a bookshop in Chesham and I bought Alan Frank's book of horror movies. And I would sit there poring over each picture there of Boris Karloff and Peter Cushing and Ingrid Pitt. And I couldn't see the films, but I would imagine the films. You know that thing where sometimes when you were a kid, you had books and you had no access to things, but you would make them in your head. And many years later, I would see many of the films that I'd made in my head and find out that my head had a much bigger budget than the studio did. I loved them so much, and I think for a lot of people, sometimes it's horror, it's ghost stories, it's the uncanny, it's fantasy. These are places where we find a different set of rules to the rules that sometimes we find so oppressive in the world around us. So this is about my love of horror films, and it's called The Happy Sofa. I'm safe here, safe behind the sofa, secure behind the stuffing and ready for Karloff shuffling and werewolves snuffling and the muffled cries of another poish bride, walled in, hung up, tied down, ready to be severed as the pendulum swings. You see here, my dear, my fear has an off button. I can be cosy with Lugosi. I can commit to Ingrid Pitt. I can feel the chill with Lionel Atwill. I can shout, "It's alive!" with Colin Clyde. I can feel sorry for Pete Alari, and I can eat a fly with Dwight Fry. I'll hide the bloodstains of Claude Rains as they redden the snow, and I'll be a creeper with Rondo. I'll fight a ravenous eel for Barbara Steele. I'll visit a morgue in Manchester for the hand of Elsa Lanchester. I'll scream like a coffin-encased banshee for just one word from Christopher Lee. And I ain't messing you when I tell you I'll embroider with Ernest Thesiger. But then, the truly terrifying. The screen turns black. The end of the monster's ball. And I'm back to the playground of school where the bullies rule and the off button is always on. And I wish I was gone to the place where I am free, hiding happily behind the settee. So this is I talk a lot, and I know you are meant to as a poet go, there we go, that's my poem. Let's celebrate me, but I'm not very good at that. So if you feel like it, please do. Don't feel under tremendous pressure in the direct etiquette of a poetic performance. So when I was 9, my first library was a mobile library, and we'll talk about that later on. My first bricks and mortar one was Chorley Wood Library, and I was desperate to get a copy of The Making of Doctor Who. They didn't have it, and they had to put it on order. And what seemed like possibly centuries went past. And then one day I walked into the library with my 4 little library cards, and they said, "It's coming. It's come all the way from Hitchin Library." So that was when I first knew of Hitchin even existing, because I thought this must be the most magical place. And it does look like the TARDIS has kind of managed to change itself a bit in that central area by the church. One of my favourite books is a book. Yeah, this is a very long shot. If someone in this audience has read it, I'm so glad. It's called Undrowned: Black Feminist Lessons from Marine Mammals. Right? And that's exactly what it is. It's by a woman called Alexis Pauline Gumbs, the most wonderful poet. And it is, she loved marine mammals. She was a poet, she also loved marine mammals. And then she looked at the marine mammals, and the more she studied them, she found how often the way that they'd been named, the way that their behaviour had been understood, all of these things was very much from the prism of who was the most dominant in the society at the time. So we look at the way society is, and we think we're being objective, but it's a book that's filled with love and joy. At one point she says, "Who is this book for? This book is for you, otherwise known as everyone who knows a world where queer black feminine folk are living their fullest and most abundant lives is a world where everyone is free." And you read that and you go, it's not closing it down. It's like when you get authors like... I went to Dormouse Books, which is in Belper, near Derbyshire. It's really worth going to, because also you go 2 stops up further, there's a place called Scarfin, and Scarfin Books is one of the greatest in Cromford, actually. It's the anyway, look, you don't understand about that. You can find that there. Anyway, so, the woman who runs Dormouse Books, most of her fiction, it just happens, is by female authors. But there's a lot of great female authors. You've got the Brontes, you've got George Eliot, you've got Margaret Atwood, you've got, we just Ursula Le Guin, we go on and on and on, right? And she says, every now and again, about once every 2 months, the same man comes in, except he's a different man, but he's the same man. And she says he always wears, I love this description, she says, very deliberate red trousers. You know what I mean by the deliberate red trousers, right? And he will stand in the middle of the small shop and go, "I see you don't stock any books for white middle-aged men," and then leave. And I think what a remarkable thing it is to not read that the stories written by people who have not lived life like us are the stories which take us to the most amazing and brilliant places. Because when I actually finally met Alexis, like 2 years after I'd been banging on about a book to everyone, my friend Mari, the trouble is that her book was published by the Anarchist Press, who unfortunately their warehousing system is exactly what you would imagine from the Anarchist Press. My friend Mari runs the bookshop would ring up and go, "Oh, I'd like to order some of those books," and they'd go, "We know there's a box of them somewhere." But when I met her, she said this lovely thing to me, but just before she left her, by the way, just so you know, when I wrote Undrowned: Black Feminist Lessons from Marine Mammals, I never really imagined your face as one of the readers, right? And that's what we all should be, the surprised and surprising reader. So I've done a long introduction to a poem that I realise now isn't in this book. So let's have a poem about Judi Dench instead. I love Judi Dench. Judy, again, another of the cliches about people. We have this cliche of generational divide, and I find this in libraries in particular, that there is not that cliche. If you go into a library, everyone in the library is curious and interested and fascinated, and you might be 17 years old and you might be having a conversation with a 90-year-old, because if you are fascinated and curious, there isn't a great big age divide at all. If you have, I sometimes in a gig will have a 7-year-old in the gig, and I think the oldest person I have is 95 in one particular gig, and we have the most wonderful time. because the one thing that excited us all was, it's like when I do primary schools. I'm doing a primary school in a few days' time, and they are the scariest gigs. Have we got any teachers here, by the way? Primary, right? This is what I always get scared about, because the good thing is in primary school, what I found out is I actually vibrate at roughly the same speed as a child. So I get, it's like whenever I go to a friend, if they've got children or a dog, they always go, "I'm so sorry, our child's not normally like this," or "I'm so sorry," and I go, "It is very much me that's bringing this on." When I do primary schools, you know, like, what was it, year one, I was doing a year one, so that was like 5, 6 years old. And you walk in, and in fact the last one I did was World Book Day. I went directly, the night before I'd done the Crick Institute with 3 Nobel Prize winners in the front row, and the next morning I was doing Swingate Primary with 2 Willy Wonkas in the front row. Right? And you start talking, but you always have that thing about, you know, and you must know that, you know when they're losing concentration. It's not that they're coughing, it's not that they're heckling, it's that this finger in particular starts to go further and further up the nose. I'm so bored, I want to lobotomise myself. Right? And I love when you get, you know, when you've got those people who have not got scared yet, because that's another thing that happens. We get scared. What if I say the wrong thing? What if I pronounce the name of that poet wrongly? What if I don't understand that idea of science? Well, if we keep quiet about it, then we never learn. And also, I think pronunciation, I don't really care about. I want to make that clear as well. There's a lot of things. I'm no fan of punctuation, right? I literally, that's what the editor does in my book. And I always tell children this, I go, sometimes you will get a story back and I'll have all these red marks from bad punctuation. Just so you know, it's the least important thing. The most important thing is your imagination. And if you work at it hard enough, eventually you get somebody who does the punctuation for you. So sometimes I'm not asked back to the schools. But I find, you know, it's like there's a beautiful thing with, when I was doing, because I think, you know, sometimes people say about young people, young people nowadays, they're always looking at their screens, aren't they? They're always looking at their screens. And I remind people of my generation that when we were young, we used to watch the test card, right? So imagine, they've actually got things on their screen. We would watch a girl sat still next to a strange soft toy, which we had no, and then waiting, going, imagine in an hour it might be teletext, right? So, and it's not, you know, it's not a generation. So that's why I mentioned Judi Dench or Jane Goodall. You know, both of them now in their 90s. Judi Dench had her first tattoo when she was 80. She thought, I've never had one of those. It's time to have one of those done. There's also a very rude joke I won't tell because we're in the library. I might tell the lesser rude, because this is what happened when she came to. She was on the show I do, The Infinite Monkey Cage, and she was. Like, our producer was probably like, kind of, exactly as you imagine the BBC. When Dame Judy arrives, make sure both of you are here to receive Dame Judy. Then the card will be rolled out for Dame Judy. Dame Judy will then be led through the Royal Institution. And I said, you do know she's not actually Queen Victoria, don't you? She doesn't want all that fussing about. And I said, she loves dirty jokes. And our producer went, do not tell her any dirty jokes. I said, she likes them, and I know. And so, well, I'll give you the less dirty joke, right? This is one, but the one about Billy's really good, but I'm not going to do that one. So, well, I'll give you the punchline. Yeah. Not so funny when it's your mother, is it? Anyway, so that's the first one that I told her was, I'll give you the middle bit if you need it for your friends later on. But the first one that I told her, which I love, is the vicar is going to do a talk at the Women's Institute about sex. But he's just put WI in his diary. So his wife's going through the diary. She goes, WI, Tuesday. What are you doing? Are you doing a talk? What are you doing a talk about? He suddenly gets embarrassed. He goes, sailing. I'm doing a talk about sailing. He goes, sailing? Okay. Anyway, goes off, he does the talk. A week later, she's in the greengrocer's. Woman comes up, she goes, excuse me, you're the vicar's wife, aren't you? She goes, yes, I am. So I'm a member of the WI. I was at his talk last Tuesday. It's one of the best talks I've ever been to. I have never learnt so much. And the wife says, that's weird. She's only done it twice. The first time he was sick, and the second time his hat blew off. Judy thoroughly enjoyed that. So this is about the. She loves trees as well, and I love trees as well. This is I adore, you know, everywhere. I love seeing trees growing out of walls. I love seeing moments where nature is kind of, you know, manages to beat the human mind. Yeah, and that's the. And we were talking about the fact, like, one of the things that will annoy Brian Cox is if I talk about ghosts, right? If I bring up ghosts and go, Ghosts don't exist. They break the second law of thermodynamics. Right? But I was going, ghosts do exist. They don't exist due to the laws of physics, as far as we can see, but they exist in our imagination. And that is a place on Earth. And that is, I was talking to, in fact, she's gone now, one of the librarians who she's interring her dad tomorrow, died a year and a half ago, and we were talking about those ghosts. When I'm looking at books, when I'm in bookshops, when I'm in David's, in Letchworth, and I'm finding all manner of things there, and I see the books that I would have got from my dad, or the books I would have rung up my dad about, and he's there. There is that ghost. I think we mustn't just entirely go, no, here is just the truth and the scientific truth. There must be like that William Blake space, that space of other realities. And William Blake was brilliant at this, because William Blake knew that some of his realities were his and only his. So I know when I'm in that, say, the bookshop in Carlisle that I was in recently, that was actually the place that I last bought a book for my dad, a book about the actor Robert Donat, I know his ghost isn't in there for anyone else in that room. But it's in there for me. And what Judy does is she plants trees in memory of those she's lost. And I think it's such a beautiful thing to do, to create something tangible. Because when you've got, it's like, I love, when I visit my mother and father's grave and I see what's growing out of the grave. I never like an overly tended graveyard, because I think you're missing all of those life and the berries that might be coming out and all of that kind of joy. And so, yeah, she's got trees for Michael Williams, her lovely husband, and she's got trees for Natasha Richardson. And so this was, after we finished doing the show that night, I just wrote this poem and then sent it to her. She talks of oak and yew and ash, how woods evoke the personalities of those both gone, and in the trees, alive. How branch and bark and leaf and sap can be heard to flow, and mycorrhizal networks yap. Nothing's still. In Nunhead Cemetery, out of a sun-starved tomb, the tree has found the room to shatter the mason's art. Struck free, the grave now falls apart. Long gone names, the dates eroded, moss thrives, ivy climbs. 6 feet under, maybe more. Anonymous atoms on the graveyard floor still feed the branches, trees and leaves. In death, you can still achieve. Even the hellbound have something reaching heavenward. Oh man, I'll do one more, and then what do we do? Oh, then we do questions or something, don't we? I've got more like it, but right. This one has got what some people call a rude word in it, right? I don't really think it is a rude word, but it's. I went down to. Do any of you know Prospect Cottage? Derek Jarman's cottage in Dungeness, right? Oh my! I went there 3 weeks ago. I sat in his conservatory having fish and chips. They had the keys to his bookshelves, right? And Derek Jarman was one of the most important. His diaries, if you've never read, this was a thing that was beautiful. I imagine you've read Modern Nature. It turned out it was the anniversary, it was only like 35th anniversary of the entry in the diary where the artist Maggie Hamlin said, "Oh, Derek, you've discovered nature." And you went, "I think I found nature for you." And, "Okay, Derek, you've discovered modern nature." And even though it was a tiny thing, it was something really wonderful to add that coincidence. So I went in there, and it was a proper, kind of holy trip, really, for me. It was such a... Because his work, his diaries, his films like Jubilee and Caravaggio, and he also... He couldn't stop creating. It's something that I love. I realised that all the people I'm most drawn to, both my friends and the artists, are people who make because they have to make. Because it's not like going, is the money in this? What's this idea? I mean, as you know, I'm here talking in a library for free. There's no money in it. But we did have some cake. But I brought that myself. Anyway, but no, it is that bit where you just want to create all the time. And I looked at Derek Jones. He had a work table. Just glob and glob and glob of great big chunks of paint. And every wall there was something else he'd found on the beach, and he's made this, a garden. It was just such an incredible thing. So I'm just going to see. The trouble is that I write too many. This is a great thing as well. If anyone here is neurodivergent, if anyone here, in particular, I mentioned ADHD. Oh man, poetry is the best thing. because you basically, you go, that thing's brilliant, I really love that, I'm going to write something about that. Oh, I love that thing as well. And so it's perfect, right? Whereas writing an adaptation of Beowulf, that's better for an autistic mind. So that's always such a right. Sorry, this has taken a while. I should write fewer poems or something. But they are. But I'm going to say this because this is kind of really the new book that I've done. One of the things that I was writing about the other day is realising sometimes people get very worried about, oh, this is a silly poem, actually, I'll just do this. It's true, though. On the way to Walmer, a passenger calls his friend to say he's getting warmer and near his journey end. Hey, Wayne, is how he greets him. And now I can only imagine that his friend's a special constable. Anyway, yeah, I know. Very Radio 4, that one. This is, oh man, I'm so sorry that this is, I've got to work out a system, but I should have done that years ago. This is, Derek Jarman. I can do another one from, I'll tell you what, while I'm looking for it, I'll do a poem that I know off by heart, which is about starlight and also our anxiety as human beings. Last night, a ghost collided with my head. It was the light from something dead. Once it breathed hydrogen into helium, created a beacon, projected its life across the sky. And some of that life hit me in the eye and expanded my mind. In its size and in its power, it was grander than I could ever be. But it never knew how grand it was. It never knew the awe it inspired. It never experienced its existence. There was nothing it was like to be that star, only something it was like to marvel at that star, because the stars cannot wonder about the stars. And Jupiter too is without curiosity. Me? I'm small and I'm fragile and I'm easily felled by meteorites or by microbes. But I'm pugnacious, inquiring, tenacious. I can chew on the quandaries of the cosmos. I've got a skull full of pictures and questions and problems too. I don't like my anxiety. But then I realise it's also my fire, because much that destroys me also creates me. There is something it is like to be me, and it's not always satisfactory. My atoms battle, my molecules revolt, but still more than the single line of an equation or a solo chemical reaction. Confused, confusing, absurd. But flashes of inspiration, and out of my ashes may grow apples. Emergent complexity briefly defeats the void. And the thing that I'm proudest of in that poem is someone wrote to me and said, can you remind me what the final line is? And then 2 weeks later sent me a picture of their tattooed arm with that on there. Said, finally, I've eaten someone's flesh. So this is about Derek. Who wants to ask a question? Anyone got a question now to ask? Anything at all you want to ask? Okay, yes?
Are you planning to publish your poetry?
Yes, I am planning to publish poetry. The first one's going to be called Ice Cream for a Broken Tooth. Because when I was 3, I fell over a step and I snapped my tooth. And there's a little picture of me just sat there now with my bowl haircut that anyone here who is of that day, we all had to have the same weird haircut that made it look like we have really big meat-con heads. And so the first one is, that's coming out in July. And then I'm also, I'm working on quite a few at the moment, because I'm working with my friend Joanna Neary, who's the most wonderful artist, and general artist. She did something, again, this is something that's very beautiful that could have been turned into a kind of bantery thing. When Trent and I, we do these shows at Christmas where we mix up scientists and musicians and comedians and poets, and Jim Al-Khalili was on, and Joe was doing this character, which is wonderful, which is a nervous woman attempting to give a talk about sex toys, right? And it is just sort of going, another thing, but sorry, is someone eating egg? I can smell egg. So the vibrating balls come, my throat's very dry, and it goes all right, and she goes, my throat's dry, but the vibrating balls. And Jim Al-Khalili started to walk out with a glass of water. And I said, no, Jim, she hasn't really got a dry throat. She's pretending to be a nervous lady. And he said, I feel like an idiot. I said, no, that is beautiful, because that is two things there. One, you really believed her performance. 2, you are kind enough to go and walk out on stage and deliver the water. So again, that situation that could have just been turned into a ha-ha can actually be a situation of incredible beauty. Oh yes, it is coming out. Anyone else like to ask anything? And keep going though if you don't. Yes.
Brian Blessed was going to read one of your poems.
Do you want me to do more of my poems? The other day I was playing in Ludlow, and so when I was signing books, someone went, and it was just this little corridor, and they went, "Oh, a bit disappointed you didn't need Brian Blessed." I went, "Oh, for God's sake! I forgot to do bloody Blessed!" So I've never done that before. Actually, that's a nice little challenge to have. Which one shall I do? Banter. Here we go. Less banter, more beauty. There's enough belligerence, barbarism, and bullying. Brag less of being biting. Boast more of being ebullient. Embrace bark and bottom, badlands and Bambi, Basquiat and Beardsley. Allsright and Blake. Leave behind those who'd rather bruise than applaud. You burrow like botflies and beam when there's blood. No time for bludgeoning! Be braver than the bitter. Put away your broad axe. Make the barren bounteous. Leave seeds upon your tracks.
In many ways, I don't want to and I'd love.
You have to. You genuinely have to.
Well, I'd love to continue listening to you all night long. But I just want to start by saying a massive thank you for.
No, thanks everyone for coming, and thank you. Let's hear it for all the librarians.
Yeah, I'd love it if you just joined me in giving Robin another huge round of applause.